My lords, today I'm going to rank Standard Empire Civics based on their storytelling potential. We have an awful lot to get through. Regular empires have access to a massive 60 standard civics and 21 permanent civics. Civics represent the foundational principle and societal structure that define your empire. They are primarily limited by your government type, i.e. democratic, oligarchic, dictatorial, and imperial, but they're also limited by the ethics that your empire possesses. Xenophiles can't be purifiers, for example. Your empire will start with up to 2 civics, and you can add a third later via the Galactic Administration technology, and there are some shenanigans where you can get a 4th. In any case, I have 4 categories to rank these civics: peak storytelling device, solid roleplay option, stat stick only, and a missed opportunity. Whether we'll need a missed opportunity, I'm not sure. But let's begin with standard civics. And we begin with the Agrarian Idyll. A simple and peaceful life can often be the most rewarding. This agrarian society has to a large extent managed to avoid large-scale urbanization. This civic, as you would expect from the description, sets you up to avoid city districts and be really good at farming. You will find that your agriculture districts and your generator and mining districts have increased housing, whereas your city districts have decreased housing. You'll also receive amenities per 100 farmers and can specialize agricultural districts without any technology, and you'll be locked out entirely of the arcology perk, which unlocks the EQ monopolists. Interestingly, this civic requires you to be a pacifist. That restriction seems a little bit odd to me, but perfectly understandably, you can't take this civic with other civics like Relentless Industrialist or Tank Bound. You also can't take it with certain origins like Shattered Ring or Void Dwellers. All of that makes sense, I'm just not quite sure why it's restricted to pacifism. Indeed, who's to say a spiritualist wouldn't enjoy a simple and peaceful life farming? Perhaps that is how they worship their deity. The council position that this civic provides is an elder farmer, which further increases farmer output. Now, this is a really good civic to start with, as I think it's more than stat stick only. It clearly doesn't just provide mechanical benefits, there's certainly a story element around it. I don't think it quite reaches the highs of some of the other civics, so it's not a peak storytelling device. I think it's a really good option for solid roleplay. Next up we have Aristocratic Elite. This society has an entrenched nobility that occupies the upper echelons of society. This civic somewhat changes your elite jobs. Politician jobs are replaced with noble jobs, and you can construct noble estates instead of the regular capital buildings. It provides a 10% job efficiency for elites at the cost of 10% upkeep, and it also has a chance for leaders to start with an additional positive and negative trait. It is locked to the oligarchic or imperial governments, which I think makes reasonable sense, and egalitarians can't take it. I think the requirements are quite reasonable with this one. It seems fairly obvious that an egalitarian wouldn't necessarily have an aristocratic elite, although I do think that there is general scope for a sort of imperial authoritarian government ruling an egalitarian class society. It doesn't seem unreasonable to me that an imperial leader, certainly a benevolent one, would want the best people in the positions underneath them, and wouldn't necessarily see that as a threat to their position. But that's conversation for another day. I think similarly to Agrarian Idyll, this fits in the solid roleplay option, though perhaps a little bit less so. It certainly is more than a stat stick, it offers building changes, and it offers a clear path for your empire, but I certainly don't think it meets the requirements of peak storytelling device, so I think solid roleplay option is the best place for it. Next we have Ascensionists. The ultimate goal of this empire is to ascend to ever greater levels of fulfillment. This civic gives you 25% increased planetary ascension effects at a minus 10% cost, and it reduces your tradition cost from empire size by 25%. Your capital will also start at Ascension Tier 1. The council position is the Minister of Ascension, which gives you 2+ monthly unity. I can't see any other way that I can put Ascensionists in anything other than stat stick only. I don't think it's a missed opportunity because it doesn't really fulfill an opportunity. This is a quintessential mechanical civic. It's not trying to fill a theme necessarily like a driven assimilator. It's just there as a mechanical option. So I think this has to go in stat stick only. Astrometeorology. With deep respect for the forces of nature, this species goes at great lengths to uncover the inner workings of environmental phenomena. As they set out across the stars, they take with them a particular interest in astrometeorology. Central to their ambitions are the most fantastic and potentially destructive of all astronomical events, the cosmic storms themselves. This civic has no restrictions. It has the council position of a prime forecaster, which increases the astrometeorologist resource output, and the astrometeorologists come from the Astrometeorology Observation Building, which is a replacement for one of your research labs. It has a planet limit of 1, it increases unity from jobs by 5%, and astrometeorologists turn consumer goods into research, so it's sort of like a slightly better version of a research labs. It also gives you unity. I'm not really sure what the theme of this civic is supposed to address. Obviously, these people are interested in cosmic storms, and it just gives you a little bit of technology. I think this has to go in stat stick only. Maybe it's a missed opportunity. It's difficult to work out what theme it's supposed to represent, and therefore how can it be a missed opportunity? I think it goes in stat stick only, but it's certainly not a civic that particularly draws me in with excitement. Next we have Beacon of Liberty. This society is a shining beacon of light in a sea of darkness. Liberty and individual freedoms are held in the highest regard here. This civic will give you increased monthly unity by 10%, it will give you a 25% refugee attraction, it will lower your empire size from population, and it will give you a -1 on the smuggled population operation difficulty. This civic is locked to the democratic government type and egalitarians, and somewhat obviously is restricted from xenophobes. I think the Beacon of Liberty is a really solid roleplay option. The stats it gives you line up with the civic, it seems reasonable, and it clearly sets your empire on a path. This is an empire that quite literally wants to be a shining beacon of light in a sea of darkness. I think this is much more than a stat stick only, and therefore I'm going to put it in solid roleplay option. Moving on to Byzantine Bureaucracy. This society is largely governed by a complex and to the outsider almost labyrinth system of bureaucracy. An army of officials and functionaries work tirelessly to keep the government running smoothly and ensure no citizens are allocated resources they cannot demonstrate a properly filed and triple stamped need for. This civic is not locked at all. It gives you 1 unity per 100 bureaucrats and 1 stability per 100 bureaucrats. And its council position administrative coordinator decreases the administrator upkeep by 2%. This feels to me like a bit of a nothing civic. Clearly, mechanically it's quite nice. The stats it gives you is fine, but it doesn't really have a theme behind it. But the changes that it makes to your empire, they're not really theme, they're just a simple stat. I can't see any reason not to put this in stat stick only. Catalytic Processing. By focusing their industrial efforts into catalytic chemistry, this civilization has unlocked the key to using organic material in the construction of space-bound structures. Now this is quite an interesting civic, as it somewhat changes the way that you play the game. Essentially, instead of using minerals to create alloys, you use food. Now that translates to your regular alloy jobs being replaced with catalytic technicians, you start with less mining districts, and you start with more agricultural districts. Your council position is the principal catalyst, which further increases alloy output. Now on the surface, this feels like a relatively straightforward civic. Instead of using minerals to produce alloys, you now produce food, but I have seen people construct entire roleplays around this specific civic, and it certainly leans itself into storytelling. I don't think this is quite a peak storytelling mechanic, but I do think it's a solid roleplay option, and thus that's where I'm going to put it. Moving on to civil education. In this empire, education has supplanted law enforcement. Through comprehensive preparation and strict course correction, they ensure that no individual is beyond the reach of learning. After all, there are no bad citizens, only bad educators. This civic gives you the Head of Education Council position, which reduces upkeep from jobs, and it replaces Enforcer jobs with Educator jobs, replaces Precinct houses with State Academy, and you start with the State Academy building. This is an interesting one. It's not really a stat stick, because it's a job switch. Is it really a stat stick? I don't think so. It has a key theme. Does that theme have weight to it? Maybe. I guess that this is probably a solid roleplay option, but it doesn't feel quite as solid as perhaps some of the other ones. I don't really think I can put it in a stat stick though. Could it be a missed opportunity? Maybe, but I'm not quite sure what else they could have done with this one. This is a weird one. I guess I'll put it in solid roleplay option. I think there's going to be quite a lot of effort on your part to bring the best out of this civic. Moving on to corporate dominion. This society is dominated by a megacorporation that has completely supplanted the role of the state. This civic is locked to the oligarchic government type, and xenophobes cannot create it. You get +1 external recruitable leader per class, you can build private colony ships, and you start with the off-world trade company technology. Similar to civil education, this is an odd one because it's sort of just a job swap. Is this a solid roleplay option? I guess so. It's more than a stat stick. It certainly isn't a peak storytelling device. I think it probably goes in solid roleplay option. Moving on to Corvee System. This society considers that it is the absolute right of the state to decide where its citizens live and work. This civic will increase automatic resettlement chance, worker pop output, and decrease resettlement cost. It also removes the unity cost for resettlement. You get the Employment Commissioner Council job, which increases worker pop resource output. This feels to me a little bit more like a solid roleplay option. Unlike the previous two that we just discussed, this sets quite a clear theme for your empire. It feels much more authoritarian, although you don't have to be an authoritarian to take it, but it's clearly pushing you down that sort of path. I think this is a clear solid roleplay option. Crowdsourcing. This society has realised that individual inspiration is the root of true innovation. Open source patents, open-mindedness, spontaneous collaboration, and innovation bounties pave the way to progress. If you pick this civic, instead of producing unity like normal, your factions will produce research, and they will form within 3 months. You get the Innovation Coordinator, which increases faction resource output at the decrease of ethics attraction. This is a job swap essentially, although it's not really a job swap because the jobs aren't swapping, it's faction swapping. I feel like this is just stat stick only. Does it really hold any strong theme? Not really. I don't know. I really don't think I can put this in solid roleplay option. Maybe you could construct a roleplay around it, but I don't think it's the center point at all. Crusader Spirit comes next. The lack of guidance creates weak minds, which easily succumb to corruption and plunge into decadence. This society has assumed the self-imposed mantle of bringing enlightenment to the masses through aggressive proselytizing, which, incidentally, is the act of attempting to convert someone from one religion, belief, or cause to another. This increases ship weapon damage and ship build speed, and is perhaps the first that could reach the peak storytelling device civic. It locks your war philosophy into liberation wars, which is quite important on the galactic stage. It gives your commanders the Crusader trait, and you get the council position Lord Commander, which further increases fire rate and army damage. You can't be a pacifist or a genocidal with this civic, you have to be authoritarian, spiritualist, or militarist. Of all the civics I've done so far, this is perhaps one that changes the way that you play the game the most. And I think you can certainly set up a really good roleplay around the idea that you are Crusaders, be it you want to convert people to your religion, whatever it may be. I think that this is the first that is going to go in peak storytelling device. Moving on now to cutthroat politics. The political system in this society is renowned for its intrigue. Power struggles, shady backroom deals, and cloak and dagger scheming are par for the course. Those who survive long enough to learn the game tend to learn it well. This civic is very simple. It decreases edict upkeep and increases your code breaking skills. There are no restrictions around it, and the council position is the prime speaker, which reduces the faction resource output. Perhaps since Crusader Spirit just went in peak storytelling device, I actually may put cutthroat politics in missed opportunity. Although that might not be entirely fair to the civic, but more just a reflection of the internal politics, or rather lack of internal politics, that we have. You would expect a civic like cutthroat politics to potentially expand upon the way that our internal government works, and it doesn't. It simply decreases your edict upkeep, which, frankly, who cares? I think cutthroat politics quite fairly can go in missed opportunity. I think this could be expanded, maybe something to do with factions, I'm not sure, but maybe there could be more of a way that they could expand upon this civic to give us better control over our internal systems. After all, it is cutthroat politics. Moving on to Dark Consortium. A deep understanding of the architecture of the universe allowed this society to exploit the mysterious properties of dark matter long before the discovery of the hyperdrive. If you choose this civic, you can use dark matter resource strategic edicts, you can use the dark matter breakthrough agenda, and if added during Empire creation, you can't remove it, but you do start with the dark matter drawing technology, which is quite cool. You get the civic the Shadow Weaver, which increases dark matter from research stations by 20%. I'm torn on this one. I really wanted to put it in solid roleplay option, but it doesn't really do anything. It doesn't really explain why or how this empire discovered dark matter, and did it impact their ability to rise? Did it change the way that their technology progressed? Not really. It's a stat stick, and it's a really nice stat stick. Could I put it in missed opportunity? Maybe. The trouble is, I guess, that civics don't necessarily lead themselves into narrative stories. It's sort of for the player to make their own story with the civics most of the time. I think this could fall into missed opportunity, but I'll put it in stat stick. I think that's fair. If you disagree, by all means, please tell me in the comments. Moving on to Death Cult. This society's religion is built around periodic ritual sacrifices, willing initiates to devote themselves to a decade of study before meeting an end whose effects ripple through their culture. Now, I should caveat this with Death Cult is perhaps one of my favourite civics, and this is because I think it is a peak storytelling device. Death Cult drastically changes the way that you play the game, particularly the early game. You can build sacrificial temples and shrines, and you can use sacrifice edicts, which essentially every 10 years you sacrifice a proportion of your population to gain boons, be it unity or what have you. You also have to be a spiritualist to take this edict. The council position is the Apostle of Death, which increases the sacrificial edict effect. Now, I think this is a peak storytelling device, because not only does it change the way you play the game, particularly the early game, but it also comes with a clear theme for your empire. You sacrifice members of your own population, and you get a boon for doing so. That clearly separates it from lots of the other civics. Thus, peak storytelling device for me. Dimensional worship comes next. This society believes that a divine existence lies beyond the folds in space and time. Systems where instabilities are highest hold a sacred meaning to them as sites of both pilgrimage and research. This gives your bureaucrats a physics output, it increases the chance for astral rifts to appear in own systems, and it increases the chance to discover rare technologies. You get the Astral Minister, which increases monthly astral threads by 2%. And you have to be spiritualist. I think this is really solid. I think it's a solid roleplay option. It doesn't really change the way that you play the game too much, but clearly your empire is going to be focused on discovering and exploring astral rifts. I think that's very reasonable. And for that reason, it goes in solid roleplay option. Diplomatic Core. This society has a long tradition of rhetoric and debate, and celebrates those who are able to get their way using only words. The civic will give you +2 available envoys, increase your diplomatic weight and your trust cap, and also make your envoys that much better at improving relations. You get the High Ambassador Council position, which will increase your trust cap by +5. I really like Diplomatic Core in the way that it's designed as a civic. I think it's very straightforward. It's clearly a stat stick only, but it's straightforward. It makes sense. It gives me a reason to pick it. I don't think it's necessarily a solid roleplay option, but I don't think that's necessarily a negative in this case. It does what it's supposed to do, and it goes in stat stick only for me. Distinguished Admiralty, which I'm told is one of the more popular civics in the game. The fleet and the Admiralty have an unusually prominent role in this society. They wield a great deal of influence in political circles, and they have the pick of the litter when it comes to new military recruits. The civic will increase your commander starting level, it will decrease the upkeep, your ships will get an increased fire rate, and your fleet command limit will be increased by 20%. You have to be a militarist to take this one. This civic, I think, quite naturally falls into stat stick only. You could maybe argue it's a missed opportunity because clearly from the description, the fleet and the Admiralty have a great deal of power in this society. That's not reflected in the way that the game is played, even remotely. It is literally just a stat stick, and for that reason, I can't really put it anywhere else. Eager Explorers. Yearning for the stars, this civilization sped through several stages of development, reaching the age of the galactic exploration far earlier than most. This is one of the more complicated and more game-changing civics that we have access to, and there are lots of restrictions when we come to this. I'll put them on screen for you. Essentially, this empire hasn't researched FTL on game start. They have the Subspace drive technology, which is sort of like a rubbish version of jump drive. They also have less population, but they have a higher chance to draw voidcraft technologies. Their survey speed is quicker, as well as their sublight speed. This, for me, definitely goes in peak storytelling device. It changes the way the game is played in a way that other civics simply don't. It has a massive impact on you, and it sets a fantastic base for any potential roleplay game. This is clearly a peak storytelling device. Efficient bureaucracy. This society is renowned for its efficiency. Not only do the mag trains run on time, but the colossal bureaucratic apparatus required to run an interstellar nation has been greatly streamlined. This is a stat stick if we ever saw one. It reduces bureaucratic upkeep and increases edict fund from bureaucrats and priests. That's all it does. I don't really think it's a missed opportunity because it's quite difficult, I think, to build a society around bureaucrats in the first place, but I really don't think we can put this anywhere than stat stick only. Entropy Drinkers. This is one of the newer civics. It came with Shadows of the Shroud, and it's an awful lot of fun. This society drains valuable metabolism from idle population via parasitic psychic connections. Once properly collected, these energies can be redistributed to the more important classes. This is a civic that cannot be added until psionic theory is researched, and it cannot be removed. It unlocks a bunch of different edicts, and you unlock special buildings as well, such as the Leeching Tower. The key aspects of this civic is you gain energy from psionic pops. Your leaders will benefit from increased lifespan and upkeep at the cost of resources from jobs, research speed, pop growth speed, and mechanical pop assembly. This also locks you into ascension via psionics. It will not work with anything else, and as such, there is a whole heap of restrictions to it. I don't think this alters gameplay quite enough to put it in peak storytelling device. I think it has to go in solid roleplay option, and I think this is a really good example to sort of compare a newer civic versus an older civic. I think what we're finding is that the newer civics have far more to them, if you like. They almost cross over with some origins in some cases. I mean, Entropy Drinkers really does have quite an impact on you, certainly if you're locked to an ascension. And I think this is clearly a solid roleplay option. I don't really think it can be anywhere else. It certainly is much more than a stat stick. It's something I'd recommend. It's a good way to play, and it's a powerful civic as well. Environmentalists. This society seeks to coexist in harmony with nature. Great care is taken to preserve the environment and limit consumerism where possible. So this civic unlocks the Ranger Lodge building, and you start with one as well. You have a minus 20% pop consumer goods upkeep. You can't use the strip mine planet decision, and you replace the industrial wasteland with a natural blocker on the homeworld if it's your starting civic. This, I think, I'm going to put in missed opportunity. It's more or less just a stat stick, but the reason I'm going to put it in missed opportunity is because if indeed the entire empire is dedicated to being an environmentalist, they could do so much more than just not use the strip mine planet decision. Why do they not get unity for pushing forward environmentalist legislation in the Galcom? That would be something really simple that would push them into a more solid roleplay option. I think environmentalist could be a really deep and interesting theme for you to explore. They, for example, could really dislike Relentless Industrialists. They could get unity if they take a Tomb World and turn it into a Gaia world. There are lots of things that I think could be added to environmentalist to fit the theme. So for me, I'm going to put this in missed opportunity. Exalted Priesthood. To guard against heresy, this society is ruled by a religious council consisting of the wisest and most pious members of the clergy. This increases your priest's unity output, and it changes politician jobs into priest jobs. This is just like the noble civic that we discussed near the start. It's really just a stat stick. I do think you can probably edge it into solid roleplay option, just because the idea that, okay, the priesthood rules this society, fine, I can get on board with that. But, you know, it's hanging on by the skin of its teeth as a solid roleplay option. All it really is a job swap. I'm shrugging my shoulders. Experimental sentencing. Judicial processing and thirst for knowledge share a single solution in this society. Working in utmost secrecy, researchers conduct harsh experiments on test subjects drawn from the criminal underworld. The occasional fatality is the cost of progress. So this is a new civic that we also got with Shadows of the Shroud, and it's very detailed. You start with a bunch of different buildings, and you have a new slave type as well as a new army type. The theme being here that criminals get sent to be tested on, and it's experimental testing as well. Clearly, you get a minus refugee interaction, but you get increased resources from test subjects. You have to be authoritarian or xenophobic to take this, which feels reasonable. I think this is a solid roleplay option. I don't quite think it fits in peak storytelling device. You certainly could theme your empire around it, but I think it would be a bit of a stretch. For me, this goes in solid roleplay option. Feudal Society. This society is organised in a feudal manner, with a monarch whose rule relies on powerful vassals that govern their territories with considerable autonomy. So unsurprisingly, you have to be imperial to take this civic, and this somewhat changes the way in which you can vassalize. You get a increased naval contribution from your vassals, as well as a increased likelihood that they will accept subjugation, and you get one subject exempt from divided patronage, meaning that you can essentially have more vassals stay loyal. It's an interesting civic, this. I think it's probably a solid roleplay option, because it certainly changes the way that you interact with subjects, and it makes it that much easier to vassalize subjects. And if that's the goal of your empire, then fair enough. I don't quite think it's a peak storytelling device because it doesn't really add anything new, but we'll put it in solid roleplay option. Free Haven. This society has a well-earned reputation as a free haven. The tired, the poor, the huddled masses yearning to breathe free. All are welcome here, regardless of their species or origin. This civic increases automatic resettlement destination chance, worker happiness, regular happiness, and refugee attraction. You have to be a xenophile to take it, and that's all it does. I think stat stick only. Do I need to say any more about that one? I don't think so. Similarly, functional architecture. This society is renowned for its simple yet functional architecture. There are those who would refer to this building style as boring or perhaps even depressing, but in most cases, neoconcrete does the job just as well as any other building material. This is a quintessential stat stick. It decreases planetary infrastructure cost and increases planetary build speed. That's all it does. It's a stat stick. Genesis Guides. This society is devoted to the creation of emergent species. As the stewards of evolution's potential, they allocate portions of their worlds to safeguard the development of pre-sapient lifeforms. Now this is a relatively complicated civic that gives you quite a lot, and this was one that was added with Machine Age. So this replaces colony ships with Genesis arcs and gives you some buffs to terraforming. It also means you start with pre-sapient population on your homeworld and you get unity and influence bonuses when you uplift pops. This is a really interesting civic, and I think I'll put it in peak storytelling device. It clearly changes the way that you have to play your empire, and it somewhat locks you into a path or a theme that you have to pursue. I think this is a really fun civic. It clearly sets you up on a path, and for that reason it's a peak storytelling device. Genetic identification. This society requires every citizen to be registered from birth in a genetic index that's used in every level of bureaucracy. I feel like there's a theme with some of the bureaucrat civics, and that is that they don't do much. This increases encryption, decreases crime, and gives you society research per 100 bureaucrats. That's all it does. Stat stick only. Is it a missed opportunity? I guess not. I feel like a lot of the bureaucrat civics are just stat sticks. Maybe that's a failing on my part, that I can't imagine an empire born out of bureaucracy. I don't know. Heroic Past. The legendary heroes of the past inspire the civilization's young people to achieve the extraordinary. As role models, government officials are expected to embody these ideals. This civic is perhaps one of the simplest in the entire game. It simply gives you 1+ leader capacity for each class, and unlocks the Grand Storyteller Council position, which increases leader experience gain and government ethics attraction. This is a really odd civic. It doesn't even feel right to put this in stat stick. Maybe this has to be a missed opportunity. It's such a nothing civic. For some reason I thought it came with a building, but apparently not. I don't really know what to do with this. +1 leader capacity for each class. I don't know what else to do with this other than put it in missed opportunity. because it doesn't do anything. I'm speechless. I have nothing to say about this one. Missed opportunity. Let's move on. Hyperspace Speciality. This society has always embraced speed. The manipulation of hyperspace is just another thoroughfare, and those with aptitude in the field have risen to the highest caste. The civic increases planet sensor range, sublight speed, physics research speed, and the chance for scientists to gain astral rift related traits. It's interesting, this is the second astral rift related civic without sort of being related to astral rifts. It's an odd one, isn't it? I think this goes in stat stick only. Does it set up a theme for my empire? Is it a solid roleplay choice? Not really. I think this has to go in... Not really, I don't think so. I think it has to go in stat stick. Maybe they could have done more with this one. Idealistic Foundation. This society was founded on a strong idealistic value. Whether the current government remains true to them or not, the people have not forgotten. This is another very simple civic. It increases citizen pop happiness and refugee attraction. That's it. That's all it does. Stat stick only. Imperial Cult. This society has a dominant state religion where the ruler is worshipped as a living deity. This is a stat stick, but I think this is going to go in missed opportunity. They could have done more with this civic. Again, this is encroaching on the difference between civics and origins, but if the society has a dominant state religion where the ruler is worshipped as a living deity, surely something should happen when the leader dies? Or, I don't know. Maybe it should be a bit more like Death Cult, where the leader has an edict choice and can deliver different edicts to the people every 10 years, and that means something. I think Imperial Cult goes in missed opportunity. I feel like they could do so much more with that. Of course, you could argue it crosses over with Under One Rule slightly, but I'm not asking for that level of detail in the Civic, but I am asking for a little bit more. Lubrication tanks. This machine empire improved upon its basic drone shell production through the vigorous application of highly aggressive lubrication agents. Controlled by carefully programmed terminals, this optimized process relies on typically wasted byproducts from the industries that are now repurposed for maximal efficiency. This is a job swap, I believe, and it allows you to create the hyper lubrication basin building. All I can really do with this is put it in stat stick. I don't think it's a solid roleplay option. You're playing as machines that have optimized how to deal with their waste. Is there a really good story there? If there is, I'm not sure I can see it. I think it goes in stat stick. Master Crafters. A penchant for meticulous crafting lies at the heart of this society. Deft appendages and keen sensory organs aid them in creating truly wondrous treasures, even in the most basic of trades. This is a job swap. This replaces artisan jobs with artificer jobs. They basically do the job, but they're better. This has to go in stat stick. There's nothing else to it. Could you put it in missed opportunity? Maybe, but it would probably be harsh. I think it has to go in stat stick. Memorialists. This empire pays tribute to the memories and sapience of the past, deriving greater stability and insight from the continuous cycles of death, rebirth, and legacy. This civic gives you a different building. It replaces the monument building with a sanctuary of repose, and you start with one of them as well, and it gives you unity from Leviathan parade situations, which is quite cool. Does it pay tribute to the memory and sapience of the past? Maybe. If it did, maybe they'd be more interested in precursors. Maybe that's getting too close to the Galactic Curators. I'm not sure. I think this is probably only really a stat stick. Is it a solid roleplay option? I think the theme of it is a solid roleplay option, but it doesn't do enough. It doesn't do enough for me to push it that little bit higher. I think it just has to go in stat stick. Merchant guilds. A number of powerful and very influential merchant guilds have risen to prominent positions in the society. They hold significant sway with the government. So this is the same as what we discussed before with the noble jobs and the priest jobs. It's just a capital building swap where your politician jobs become merchants. It doesn't do anything beyond that. It has to go in stat stick. Again, it's the same conversation. Is it a solid roleplay option? Well, not really. It doesn't really change the way that you play the game. It just means you get merchants instead of politicians, which, while that may impact your resource, it doesn't actually do anything. It's just a stat stick. Meritocracy. Also one of the community's favourites. An individual's societal station or personal connections should have no bearing on their profession. The sole basis for advancement in the society is demonstrated by ability and talent. Now I think on theme this is quite an interesting civic. This increases specialist pop resource output and it gives additional leader trait options. This is locked to democratic or oligarchic, which is what I find slightly interesting about it. I touched on this theme very briefly earlier. I don't think it's unreasonable if I'm an imperial king or a monarch or whatever it might be. I operate an imperial government. I still want the best in class researcher, general, soldier, fighter pilot, whatever it might be. And it irritates me that because I'm an imperial and I'm a monarch, therefore that means my entire society has nepotism and all the other stuff that comes with it. I would quite like a world in which I could do both, which I accept. Maybe that's unreasonable, but that's what I would like. In any case, I think this is just a stat stick. It doesn't really change the way it plays the game. It is on theme, but I don't really think I can put it in solid roleplay because it doesn't really do anything. It's not like when you're selecting your leaders, you know, your cousin is highlighted and you can't pick your cousin. Mining guilds. Several large mining guilds have reached a dominant position in this society. The government relies heavily on their support. This is a quintessential stat stick. It increases minerals per miner's stat stick. Mutagenic Spas. This civilization engages in ritualistic mutagenic bathing, with professional attendants overseeing the use of highly dangerous substances. The invigorating process may appall uninitiated onlookers. So you get some special buildings with this, and it sort of does what it says on the tin, in theme at least. Your people go to these spas and bathe, I guess. Is it solid roleplay? Not really. I don't know. It's certainly not peak storytelling. I guess, is it a bit more than a stat stick? I'm probably being unfair to it if I put it in stat stick. Is it a solid roleplay option? Maybe. I'm torn. I'll put it in solid roleplay, but if someone has strong feelings about it, I could be convinced to push it down. Nationalistic Zeal. A strong sense of nationalistic pride permeates all layers of this society. This gives you war exhaustion gain, claim influence cost reduction, and diplomatic weight per arrival. I'm going to put Nationalistic Zeal in a missed opportunity because it should do more than just give you that. If the idea is that your society is strongly nationalistic, then why, when you win a war, do you not get some bonuses? And equally, when you're humiliated, it should be much more of a punishment than a regular humiliation, because your people's entire sort of being is centered around the idea that you are the best empire and so on and so forth. So I feel like Nationalistic Zeal is a missed opportunity. I understand why it is the way that it is, and that stat stick civics are important, and sometimes it's about mechanical balance, but I think Nationalistic Zeal could fall in missed opportunity. You could get so much more out of this civic if you wanted to. Parliamentary System. The parliamentary system in this society encourages a free and lively debate. Currying favour with one of the dominant political factions can prove to be quite advantageous. This increases faction resource output by 20%, and it increases the disapproval from unmet faction demands. Factions will form in 3 months, but have halved resource production. I think this goes in stat stick, because the factions don't really do anything. Philosopher King. It is not enough to simply rule. The ship of the state must be guided by a king that wields enough wisdom and knowledge to steer it true. This gives your ruler an effective ruler skill of +5. It's stat stick. There's nothing more to talk about. Pleasure Seekers. This society rejoices in its own perfection. Those who are elevated by their privileged social structure have surrendered to a culture which glorifies pleasure and entertainment, regardless of a cost typically borne by others. So this, I think, is a peak storytelling device, because it adds just that little bit of extra spice in the form of the decadent lifestyle living standard, and it replaces civilian jobs with hedonist jobs. Now, the decadent lifestyle living standard essentially prioritizes more resources and luxuries for the privileged members of society, but in reality, it makes everyone 20% happier. Although you do find the political power is increased in elites much more than it is with civilians and workers, but even so, everyone's happy. So, great. I think Pleasure Seekers could easily be a peak storytelling device. If you pick this civic, you will almost certainly set your empire up around it in theme. I think it's great. Peak storytelling device. Police state. To quash any traces of dissent, the population in this repressive society is carefully monitored and controlled by a large internal police force. This increases stability, enforcer job efficiency, and you get some unity from enforcers as well. I think this is just a stat stick. I don't think this is a solid roleplay option. It doesn't really offer anything other than the stats it comes with. Pompous Purists. This society is so utterly convinced of their own superiority that any attempt at diplomacy not initiated by themselves will be utterly ignored. This, I think, is indeed a solid roleplay option. So this increases the number of envoys, and it increases the envoy improved relation ability, as well as diplomatic weight, but only when opposing resolutions. You get minus refugee attraction, which makes sense, but importantly, the main theme of this is you can send but not receive diplomatic propositions. I think this is very much a solid roleplay option. You can play as the pompous aliens who think they're better than everybody else, and it delivers on that theme. I think solid roleplay option. Rapid Replicator. So this is a machine civic that has snuck in. This society has taken control of the means of self-assembly. Each machine begets another, forming an unbroken chain, stretching our planet's limits. This is clearly just a stat stick. It increases mechanical pop assembly speed. I'm not quite sure why it's in this list, actually. Reanimators. Within this society, death is no bar to the call of arms. Masters of the art of necromancy reanimate deceased corpses to raise a dread host that strikes fear into the hearts of lesser mortals. This is a solid replay option. You get some job swaps, but the key difference is when your armies are fighting, there is a 33% chance to gain undead armies per killed organic armies, which is very different to what you would normally get. Defeated organic guardians can also be reanimated, as well as space fauna, which is quite cool. Relentless Industrialists. To live is to exploit. This civilization is built around the principle of living life to the fullest, in the sense of squeezing the maximum amount of profit from every last ounce of matter and membrane available for exploitation. This is a bit of an odd civic to me. I think it's certainly a solid roleplay option because it definitely changes the way you play the game. Yeah, it's a bit of an odd one. Could they have done more with this? No, I don't think so. I think it's fair to put this in solid roleplay. So you can construct, and you start with, a coordinated fulfillment center building, and essentially you can turn your planet into a tomb world if you continue to abuse it. It's an interesting civic, and I think it is really a solid roleplay option. Scavengers. In this society, nothing goes to waste, even in the grimmest times of war. No enemy technology will go undiscovered, as teams of scrappers accompanying the war fleets scrape the wreckages of anything and everything worth salvaging. This civic gives you the 10% chance per ship debris to create a ship of equal size. It gives you a 5% alloy upkeep discount. It also gives you infrastructure refunds on both planetary infrastructure and megastructures, which is quite cool. I think this goes in solid roleplay options. It's very straightforward as a civic, but it does what it says on the tin. I think it's more than a stat stick, and I think that if you pick this, you're certainly going to lean into it and therefore make it a solid roleplay choice. Selective Kinship. In an uncertain universe, only kin can be trusted. This civilization is selective about the species it defines as equals. Choosing the civic will increase citizen happiness on planets with two species of the same founder class. So what that means is avians or mammalians or so on and so forth. You'll get citizen happiness while oppressing other species classes, and 100% opinion within the same founder species class. I quite like this civic. It's an odd way of being xenophobic. It's sort of being like, look, we really like the mammalians, but those toxoids, screw those guys. I think this is a solid roleplay option. It definitely changes the way you play the game because of the way that the diplomatic interactions work. I think this is solid roleplay option. Shadow Council. Unbeknownst to its own citizens, this society is actually manipulated from behind the scenes by a secretive Shadow Council. Appearances must be kept, but the tyranny of the majority vote should also be guarded against. After all, what if the fools vote for the wrong candidate? This is essentially a stat stick. It reduces election cost, increases effective councillor skill, increases code breaking and infiltration speed. Does it really bow into a theme? Are there any events that are tied to the Shadow Council? Who are the Shadow Council? Are you the Shadow Council? It's a bit of an odd one. Is it a missed opportunity? Maybe it is a missed opportunity. Maybe there's a world in which you would have two councils with this civic. You would have the Shadow Council that you pick, and then you would have the sort of actual council which is elected. I'm not sure. I think I'm going to put that in missed opportunity. Shared burdens. This society believes in an equitable distribution of resource, making little to no distinction between the needs of ruler and ruled. all work together for the benefit of the whole. The main aspect of this civic is you can use the shared burden living standard, which spreads political power, happiness, and trade across all social strata, and it also gives some bonuses to civilians as well. This is a solid roleplay option. I don't think it can be anything of that. It's certainly above stat stick. I think solid roleplay option is reasonable for shared burdens. Slaver guilds. Much of the true political power in this society rests with a number of powerful and ruthless slaver guilds. They know how to get the most out of a slave. Slaver guilds is an interesting one because it does very little. It increases job efficiency for slaves and decreases refugee attraction. That said, I do think it's a solid roleplay option. If you choose this, you are clearly leaning into a specific theme. The stat stick it offers is very minor. I think it's a solid roleplay option. Static research analysis. This society excels in predictive analysis within research methodologies, ensuring the pursuit of only the most promising leads. This is a very stat stick civic. It gives you an increase in research alternatives, increase in code breaking, and your head of research has an increased experience gain. That's all it does. It's just a stat stick, nothing more to say. Technocracy. To maximize efficiency, this society is governed according to the principles of science and rationality. The personal whims of an ignorant and dangerously unqualified political elite must not be allowed to interfere. This is an interesting one. So this gives you research alternatives and increased scientist capacity at a reduction of official capacity. Politician jobs are replaced with science director jobs, so it's a bit like the noble estates in the merchant and the priest civics that we discussed earlier, but it does give you a little bit more. I'm torn with technocracy because it could easily go in solid roleplay option, but it could also go in missed opportunity. And the reason I say that is scientists, as brilliant as they are, tend not to also be the best, perhaps, administrators or officials. Scientists can be absolutely wonderful people and they're really good at their jobs, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're really good leaders, if you like. So I think technocracy could fit into missed opportunity because there needs to be a negative side to the coin, and there isn't really one. I think it's something that could be explored more. If anyone wanted to argue with me and say, no, absolutely, King, it's a solid roleplay option, it fulfills the role, I could agree with you, but I think I'm going to put it in missed opportunity. Because I do think that perhaps when you go down the idea that, okay, we're going to give all of the power to the scientists, or all the power to the merchants, for example, that has some inherent negatives with it. Because if you're the best scientist on Earth, you're almost certainly not going to be the best leader on Earth. You're almost certainly not going to be able to manage people as well as the best manager on Earth. And I think, therefore, some of the negatives should move into these civics to sort of bulk them out a little bit. Perhaps something to explore in greater detail another day. Vaults of knowledge. The knowledge, principles, and experiences of exceptional people are digitized and accumulated in the Vault of Knowledge. So this is quite a cool civic. This gives you the Vaults of Knowledge building, which you start with, and it increases your leader skill, your effective counselor skill, and it gives additional leader trait options. I think this is a solid roleplay option. I feel like it's more than just a regular stat stick. It has a theme for your empire, which is reflected in the game and the way that you play it. Warbots. This society constantly refines its armies, economics, and education for diverse warfare strategy. Each machine contributes to collective strength, ensuring adaptability and success in conflict. This is simply just a stat stick. It doesn't do anything else. You just get commander starting level, commander upkeep bonuses, and army damage and army upkeep bonuses. And finally, with the standard civics, before we move on to the permanent ones, we have warrior culture. This society is developed into a hardy warrior culture. Martial prowess is valued above all else, and true glory can only be found on the field of battle. It replaces entertainer jobs with duelist jobs, replaces conserved fauna jobs with gladiatorial beast jobs, which is quite a cool job swap. You get increased army damage, decreased war exhaustion, and an increase in enclave capacity. I'd like to put warrior culture in solid roleplay, but I don't think it offers enough to go into solid roleplay. I can't think of a reason to move it up to solid roleplay, so it's going to go in stat stick only. Which moves us on to the permanent civics. I think the permanent civics are going to be much more likely to be higher up this list. So let's begin with anglers. This society provides for itself a stable influx of sustenance and economic value. This civic is tied to the founder species having the aquatic trait, and it means that there's no agricultural limit on ocean worlds. It's an interesting one. It's clearly a solid roleplay option. Your entire empire is going to lean into being an angler, but I question why it's permanent. I'm not quite sure. Maybe that's for balance reasons. In any case, I think it's fair to say this is solid roleplay. I don't think it's peak storytelling. I don't think it does enough. But this next one may very well be. Barbaric Despoilers. This society holds few things sacred. To fight is to live, and the strongest may seize whatever they covet. Barbaric Despoilers can use the Despolation Casus Belli, and they get the raiding bombardment stance as well. They can't form migration treaties, and they get locked out of some federations. I think Barbaric Despoilers is a peak storytelling device. It drastically changes the way that you play the game, and it pushes you down one clear path and one clear theme that you start for your empire. It's a peak storytelling device, and it's a lot of fun to play as. Beastmasters. Coming to a full technological maturity in a system that serves as their feeding ground for space amoebas, this society acquired a deep knowledge of their life cycle. They now work to nurture, raise, and ultimately clone these creatures for mutual benefit. Beastmasters is also a peak storytelling device. It drastically changes the way you play the game. Your regular military ships are replaced with space amoeba, and you have to learn how to manage space amoeba and grow them into a military force with which to progress in the galaxy. It adds an incredibly in-depth breeding system and completely changes the way that you'll play the game. I think this is a peak storytelling device. Chosen. Influenced by the Shroud and their early history, this society is bound to a pact of patronage with a powerful entity. I should caveat this with Chosen is currently one of my favourite civics. I think it's an awful lot of fun, and it's a fantastic storytelling device. I don't quite think it's peak storytelling. I think it's a solid roleplay option, because you can pick your patron right at the beginning, and then you can lean into it as you go. I don't think it offers enough to put it in peak storytelling because it's not separate enough from a regular Ascension, but I do think it goes into a solid roleplay option. It's really fantastic. I highly recommend everyone give that a go. Fanatic Purifiers. This society appears hell-bent on scouring the galaxy of all sapient life. Come what may, they will suffer no Xenos to live. Fanatic Purifiers is absolutely a peak storytelling device, with the caveat that it does lock you out of a lot of the roleplay options that you would normally get access to. Of course, you do get access to a few more, or a few different choices I should say, because you're Purifiers. It is absolutely a peak storytelling device, with just that small caveat that don't always play Fanatic Purifiers, because if you do, you're missing out on certain aspects of the game. Of course, you get all the increased stat sticks that you get with the Genocidal Empire, but I do think it's fair to say that it changes the game in enough of a way to make it a peak storytelling device. Fire Cult. Forged by generations of extreme hardship, this society believes in survival through unity, and unity through survival. Only fireborn struggle can bind them tightly enough to endure a cold, uncaring galaxy. Now, I should give a disclaimer here that I've not actually tried the Fire Cult Civic out yet. It looks like it increases unity from jobs when your habitability is below 100, which is quite cool. You also get a specific Scourge of the Volcano faction. You get some job swap in that your priest and politician jobs are replaced with fire dancers and fire oracles respectively, and you can recruit something called the Ember Legion Army on planets with less than 20% habitability. It seems like quite an interesting civic that changes a relative amount from what you play. Given the disclaimer that I've not actually tried Fire Cult yet, I think it has to go in solid roleplay option, but it could very well be a peak storytelling device. Galactic Curators. The meticulous collection and preservation of historical artifacts has always fascinated this civilization, but now with the mysteries of the galaxy at their doorstep, there is everything left to learn. I really like Galactic Curators. I think it's a really fun civic that ties into a really good theme. I don't quite think it's peak storytelling. I think it's probably solid roleplay. You essentially start with the Galactic Archivism tech, which means you can go and build the Grand Archive relatively quickly, and you start with some specimens as well as their output being increased. It's a really fun civic. It definitely leans you into a theme. I think it's solid roleplay. Galvanic Synthesis. This society is able to synthesize regular alloys into living metal and molds its strength and shape-changing properties directly into their technology. This is another new civic which came with the Infernal Species Pack, and it changes an awful lot. You really can see the difference with some of the new civics versus the old civics, just in terms of the complexity that comes with it. You could argue that some of these are origin level complexity, certainly when you compare them to some of the original origins. Galvanic Synthesis gives you a 75% planetary infrastructure refund, which is jolly lovely indeed, but its key aspect is that you start with the living metal technology researched. Your homeworld has a living metal sediment planetary feature, meaning you get living metal from the off, and you can unlock some special technologies around armor components and weapons as well. I was considering putting this in StatStick because it is very StatStick in theme, but I think it gives you just enough to put it into solid roleplay, although not by much. It's much more of a mechanical civic than a roleplay civic. Idyllic Bloom. This society has always spent much time on improving and caring for their environment in the pursuit of building a true paradise for its inhabitants. Idyllic Bloom is a very simple civic. You can construct Gaia seeders, which essentially allow you to turn any planet into a Gaia world. It's really cool. There's not a huge amount to it, but I do think it's a solid roleplay option, because clearly your society wants to create Gaia worlds across the entire galaxy. Inward Perfection. This calm and pacifistic society has little use for strangers who do not understand their way of life. More than anything, they would prefer to be left alone. Inward Perfection is absolutely a peak storytelling device. It drastically changes the way that you play the game. You get big bonuses in monthly unity and pop growth and assembly speed, and it locks you out of a lot of things as well. Similar to Fanatic Purifiers, it's definitely a peak storytelling device, but I'd also recommend that you play more than just Inward Perfection. Otherwise you're missing out on large aspects of the game. That said, highly recommend it, it's a lot of fun. Marine Machines. This mechanical society is engineered for seamless operation in diverse aquatic environments and excels in crafting unparalleled marine infrastructure to drive its economy. This is essentially aquatics for machines, but I won't go over this again. I think it's a solid roleplay option, but it's a bit weird since it's machines. Natural Design. This society is adamant that nature has already created perfection in its people's genetic code. They have long devoted their medical and governmental services for the health and preservation of the natural untouched genome sequences. This is an interesting one. I think this goes in solid roleplay. I don't think it's quite peak storytelling device, but essentially it means that you're locked out of ascension perk paths. So you can't change your species and you can't ascend from when you start the game. I think that in itself gives it a solid roleplay option. There's no real story. There's nothing really there, I think, to put it in peak storytelling. Oppressive Autocracy. Only the elite of the elite deserve the best of the best. Everyone else is expected to provide for the ruling class and their lackeys. The key aspect of oppressive autocracy is that you must use the dystopian society living standard, and you get to experience all the joys that come with it. I think this is a solid roleplay option. Again, I don't quite think it's peak storytelling. I think it could be, maybe, if they added some specific oppressive autocracy events where, I don't know, perhaps your people rise up, or there's some sort of liberation event or rebellion event. I'm not quite sure. I think it goes in solid roleplay. Planet Forgers. This society thrives in volcanic environments and will even create them artificially when nature falls short. This increases max districts on volcanic worlds. It's very much a stat stick. I don't really think there's much to say other than that. Planetscapers. After eons of carefully cultivating a perfect balance on the homeworld, this society is ready to tend even the most inhospitable environments amongst the stars. At their core, these people believe that nature can be shaped, controlled, and perfected, not to tame, but in the surface of perfect beauty. We saw the Planetscapers in the report I did last week, where we attempted to make the largest planet in the galaxy. This essentially increases resources from jobs, pop growth speed, decreases pop upkeep. It's a really strong mechanically orientated civic. Is it a solid roleplay option? I don't think so. I don't think it does enough to be a solid roleplay option. I think it's a stat stick, and it's a really good stat stick, but that's it. We have the Scorched World Heralds. Heat permeates every facet of this society's culture, from traditions and rituals to technology itself. They see themselves as the galaxy's rightful fiery supremacists, viewing weaker species as mere obstacles on the path to an ideal universe, fit only for thermophiles. This is the thermophile version of Fanatic Purifiers. I think it's a solid roleplay option. This is essentially the infernal version of the Fanatic Purifiers. I think for the same reasons it goes in peak storytelling device, but I would encourage you to not overplay it unless you really enjoy it, because you will miss out on bits of the game. Secret societies. A cabal of elite and secretive figures weave complicated political threads behind the scenes, entwining internal affairs with those of other worlds. This is a really interesting civic because it unlocks the proxy war diplomatic action, essentially allowing you to start a war between two empires without getting involved. And you get some bonuses around infiltration and influence costs and unity and so on and so forth. This is a really solid roleplay option. I think it's really good. Do you know what? I could even put it in peak storytelling device. I'm going to. This is a peak storytelling device civic. I'd recommend people play with it, particularly in multiplayer. Very interesting indeed. Sovereign Guardianship. This collection of warring tribes has developed a historical preference for entrenched territories and defensive posturing. Now united, they are prepared to bring this philosophy to the stars, aiming to keep their borders solid and tensions low. This is quite an interesting civic, as mechanically for a long time it was very, very strong. I'm tempted just to put this in stat stick, but given the way that the civic controls the number of planets and systems that you can have, I think it's fair to put this in solid roleplay option. It's completely reasonable to take this civic and to play a very tight, tall empire that wants to protect its territories, and especially if you were to mix this with, say, Rogue Servitor and just try and hold the galaxy at bay, I think it's a solid roleplay option. Storm Devotion. Ever since ancient times, this society has been able to attract tempests through their rituals. Over the years, they combined technological innovations to enhance their efficiency. With the dawn of the space age, they now seek to take this knowledge to the stars. This civic effectively allows you to summon storms. It's a solid roleplay option. It absolutely sets your empire on a specific theme, and it's something that you will lean into massively if you take this civic. There's not too much else to say. It's a solid roleplay option. Superstitious Beliefs. This society claims to have discovered a ritualistic mechanism to predict the future, leveraging an esoteric pattern recognition and cyclical anomaly analysis. Proper ceremonies must be performed in every major decision to harmonize the unseen forces that shape their destiny. This is a peak storytelling device, and it unlocks something called the Galactic Edict, which enables cycle modifiers and the ability to cycle change events. This is a relatively complicated list of events that is not suitable for this video, but it's really quite interesting, all the different things that you can get and the way it all works. I think this is a peak storytelling device, and it's something that I really need to cover because it's so detailed, but certainly a peak storytelling device. And finally, the last civic is Tank Bound. This society's members live out their existence suspended in vats of specialized biofluid. As such, they're heavily reliant on assistive equipment and incapable of engaging directly in physical work. Understandably, the founder species has the tank bound trait, and it means that worker jobs from districts are all automated. This is absolutely a solid roleplay option. I don't think it's quite at the level of peak storytelling device, but you certainly can tell a really good story with this. The reason I don't quite think it's at peak storytelling device is because once you've played it once, it's very samey. Essentially, your worker jobs are automated and that's it. But it does change enough and it puts you on a reasonable theme that I think it's a solid roleplay option. So that covers all 81 regular and permanent civics for standard empire types. If you want me to do this again for corporate, hive mind, or machine intelligence, then please let me know in the comments.